Oh, hey, Nanisa, Nithawak, Nanana, Aninan. Hello, I'm Sean Chandler, and I'm from the White Clay people, and I'm the president of Aaniiih and Nakoda College, and we're here to interview an elder as part of our ANC's President's Elder Series, and the purpose of these talks is to give students in the community an opportunity to learn and be inspired by our Aaniiih and Nakoda elders. And we would like to share their stories in terms of their Indigenous Lifeways, their education, their successes, and their challenges as they encountered during their life experience. So traditional stories, ceremonial, and spiritual knowledge may be shared, but regardless of the topics that may arise, there will be a common thread that Indigenous Lifeways were the foundation that they needed to become prosperous and generous. And one of our first guests for this series is our former Aaniiih and Nakoda College president and longtime serving member of the staff and president. We have Dr. Carole Falcon Chandler. And first, I'd like to ask Dr. Falcon Chandler if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly.
Naibigo, good evening. Nanisa Bedatha Naha to everyone. I'm like Dr. Chandler said, I'm Carole Falcon Chandler. I'm a member of the Aaniiih Nation, and I am retired just recently in September 30th, actually, 2020. And it's kind of ironic that I'm now an elder. And I was told by an adopted mother from Fort Yates, North Dakota, that you're not an elder if you don't teach the younger people anything. If you're old, your age, you're not considered an elder, and that's in her tribe, which is Dakota. That's how they say it. And she said, otherwise you're just an old person. Well, I'm giving the honor of calling me an elder, but I think throughout my professional life, I think I've taught students and others things that they should know in life.
Yes. Well, we thank you for being here and spending time with us. And like we talked earlier, this may not be the only time that we do this. We may have a part 2 or 3, considering what we get through and how long we go. So first of all, where were you born and how did you grow up?
Before I answer that, I just want to also thank you, Aaniiih and Nakoda College, for giving me the honor to do this. I was a little bit nervous, and then I start thinking of the things that you wanted me to talk about, and like you said, it may take longer than uh, is that you have scheduled. But I was born at the Fort Belknap Agency, and in the old hospital. Well, it's no longer there because recently uh, it was razed, demolished. And anyway, I was born there to George Falcon and May DeSalles Falcon. My mother was the daughter of Nancy Adams DeSalles and August DeSalles, and and I'm enrolled. Like I said, I'm enrolled as a Aaniiih. Um, so that's I that's where that's where I was. Um,
And how
and
did
you asked, where did I grow up?
yeah, how did you grow up? Like, did you did you live here at the agency or both, or in Harlem, or?
I grew up at the agency, actually. My father and my mother, as when I can remember, uh, my father, they both worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so I was raised at Fort Belknap Agency, uh, and lived there till I was probably 18. But in the meantime, and I don't know if this is um, something I am not asking for pity, but I know a lot of people go through this. My mother died when I was 8, and so I grew up with my dad. She told him she didn't want. Uh, there were 3 of us, 3 siblings, didn't want us to be split up. But like we all know that sometimes, in our way, the grandparents will take the first child and raise them. So my grandma, uh, Nancy, which I called mom, we all of us, uh, grand grand kids called them mom and pop because we probably heard our parents say call them that. So uh, mom took I'm sorry, my brother, and uh, my dad hated that to happen, but that's just the way. And and he understood because he was raised with the Raining Bird family and at Rocky Boy Reservation, and so he knew the ways of the Cree, and so um, like I said, and then I had 2 aunts, 2 special aunts that took care of me. I had one special aunt, uh, Teresa, my mother's sister, Delorme, who actually, helped raise me. And then I had another aunt through marriage, but she took care of us also. And I think I was probably the pet because I was the youngest. And I have a sister, Carmen Jean, and my brother's name was Ronnie. So uh, anyway, we were raised in government housing, and actually, the house I grew up in uh, was moved to the other end. We always say the other end of the agency, and the college's shop, we call it. If anyone goes by and sees this tin uh, building or this big building located by the church in Fort Belknap, that's where I grew up. So that was, and then we we just grew up with a lot of people that lived at the agency with uh, where the parents either worked for the hospital or they worked for the bureau. So we all became friends, and it was like we grew up together like brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And so but it was kind of a lonely time because, you know, I was only 8 years old when my mother died. And so it was uh, probably never noticed at that time. I think I did. And one funny thing, I mean, it's sad, but it's funny. Uh, when my mother was being buried, and we were at the cemetery out at Fort Belknap, and so we were walking away, and I must have stumbled in probably a gopher hole or something. And my sister Carmen Jean said, "Oh," and then I was crying because I fell because I hurt myself, probably not because of my mom. And my sisters start arguing with me, and people all around being sad, and she was telling me to shut up, and uh it was that's just a funny story that I remember.
Yeah. I know, and I hope you don't mind me interrupting some of these stories and stuff. But you mentioned your dad being raised over in Rocky Boy with the Raining Bird family. Um, and when we talk about our cultural ways being restored or being lost, and those kind of things, that kind of topic, um, I remember you talked about him that that people would come and visit or stay from Rocky Boy. They would visit your dad and describe how they talked to him in the language, and what do you suspect? Well, go ahead. I'll let you explain
Well, like I said, he and my aunt Carmen, uh, her name is Carmen, my aunt, his sister. They were both raised in Rocky Boy, and really learned their indigenous ways over there. And his sister-in-law, and the sister-in-law and the brother-in-law, they don't speak to one another. And so when she would come, because Rocky Boy didn't have any medical facility, and Fort Belknap had an actual hospital where I was born. And she had a daughter who had ear ear problems, and actually her name is Pearl Raining Bird Whitford. And they would come to stay while they went to the hospital. And she was really a traditional Cree woman. She wore moccasins and uh, a scarf, and the way our people used to dress a long time ago. And somehow they would, uh, they were comfortable. She was comfortable being there, uh, and she was anyway. Her husband's name was Art Raining Bird, and my dad would always go up to Rocky Boy. And I think at the time, we were so young that we didn't realize, you know, we didn't realize how uh, wonderful that was. And I always enjoyed them coming because there was someone in our house besides us. And then there was a man that everybody should know, the older people anyway on the reservation, they called him Old Man Wheeler. He was actually related to Selena Al Ditmar. And he would come up to our house, and he'd get water, and he'd be in a wagon, a horse driven wagon, and he would fill up his water, uh, whatever containers he brought. And because my dad told him uh, to do that, to that he could use the faucet outside. And that's how my dad was. He was highly respected by all the, and at that time it wasn't Assiniboine or Grovant. Everybody was together, and that's how I grew up. I actually grew up with the Assiniboines at Fort Belknap, my closest friends, and we all grew up together, and there was no uh, people saying, I don't remember them saying the Agrovants and the Assiniboines, because I guess it didn't matter to me, because my friends, and even now I'm still we remember those times.
Yeah, more getting along, huh?
Yeah, you're getting along. I used to go to their ceremonies and stuff,
Yeah.
their hand games down, we call it down the valley.
Oh, yeah.
That's where most of them lived, down in the agency.
Yeah. I remember something interesting you said once. Brother uh, or other people from Rocky Boy would come and talk Cree to him, and he would know the language. And
Oh,
but would he respond back to them?
he wouldn't. He. Well, I remember he was around this one lady, and she would, because he would take me. I would be there with him, and she would get mad at him because he wouldn't speak the language back to her in front of me anyway.
Yeah.
But my aunt did. His sister Carmen, she did, and she followed all the ways where when a young woman becomes a woman at 16, they uh, had a ceremony for her where she'd have to go stay in a teepee, and you know when she had her monthly, and so they learned a lot. Art Rainybird was a highly respected uh, traditional, uh, kind of like a, and I don't want to say, I'd say holy man. Uh, I don't like the word medicine man, but a man that's highly respected. So it was such a loss, when he passed. And I remember when my dad passed, Art came to his funeral. Of course he would, but that's how I remember them. But I remember Pearl, and then I met different elderly people from Rocky Boy, and they were so kind to me because I know they remembered my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So we when we talk about language loss and why it wasn't carried on, you know, there must have been some reason that he grew up with that created that trauma in him that he didn't want to, like he said, he wouldn't say it in front of you. So he didn't want you to learn it, to have to go through that same type of trauma when you went to schools. So
Even but my grandma, I remember when I stayed with her a lot, and it was one of the sun dances. I'm not sure if it was a Sundance or because she had a stand, and I was helping be one of her, where people came to get buy something, like they do now at powwows or whatever. And I remember these old people, old Indian, really Indian people. They would come up and they would talk, and she would talk to them, and she understood, of course, what uh, she was highly respected. I always call her a saint. She was a saint, and she was just a kind person. Well, anyway, uh, so that was an experience for me too, because like a young youngster, like we have these young kids, I'd stand by her, and just stare and look at them while they were talking. But they didn't, we didn't grow up like my grandpa was pretty strict, even with the Catholic Church. When he was forced to uh, go, uh, they were mean. The people in the church, they were mean to him. So he wouldn't allow his daughters to go to uh, the mission schools, and so he made them go to what Chamawa, which was probably a different boarding school that was in Washington or Oregon. I think it's Washington. Um,
I
and
think,
that's where all my mother and there were four of them had to go to school there, and I had six uncles who all went to the service, and except one, it was in those days where one had to stay home and take care of the folks, and because they raised cattle. But uh, but I knew my grandma probably, and my grandpa, because their mothers were both uh, full bloods. I
oh,
get I'm going on, but I just want to say how things were. So of course they didn't learn the language because it wasn't a good thing then. Like even my grandpa not wanting them to go to Catholic church or be at that mission school. And and of course, they weren't allowed to speak language or it was just in that era. But when we're young like that, in those days, I'm 8 years old, 9 years old, or younger, and we didn't realize because I think we were all you use the word now, assimilated into uh, the like, even growing up here, uh, well, I'll go to the next question because I might talk too much.
oh no, we'll come back to all that. We can zigzag around all these. Um, so where you told me a little bit about how you grew up, but where did you go to school? Where did you attend schools? You could start with the earliest and work.
Well, um, my mother was a very sweet person. I guess by all of the friends, and but she was working at the bureau, and she sent me to school when I was 5 years old. Well, they didn't have a kindergarten in those days, but I was a little bit mature. I used to put a chair up by the sink in our house, and I'd wash dishes and already cleaning house when I was 5 years old, and so she sent me to school. So I went uh, to the first grade through eighth grade at the elementary school, and didn't have a good experience because by the time I was in the third grade, my mother had passed. So I went back. She died in August, and school must have just started. So an experience wasn't a good experience. I had a I was I was a pretty good student. I studied a lot. Not that I was just really smart, but I studied, and my grades were okay. And so I was helping my friend, and his name is Jigs Longknife. I don't know if I've never seen him since so probably he probably wouldn't even know me. But we, of course, the Indians sitting in the back of the classroom. I don't know why we did, but I guess it was assumed that's where we would sit. So we're sitting in the back row helping him. And Jigs is very dark. I was very dark. I was darker when I was a little girl, probably because we were outside all the time. But so I was helping him, and pretty soon this woman, our teacher, her name was Mrs. Kibitsa. Her husband was in charge of the railroad station. Harlem used to have a railroad station, uh, and she was the wife of that man. And she said one day, she said, while I was helping him, um, "Hey, you two coons, stop talking." And of course, we didn't know what that meant. So I went home and I told my dad, I said, "Dad, what is a coon? Oh, what does a coon mean?" And he said, "Why?" Right away he looked, and I said, "Well, Mrs. Kibitsa called Jigs and I that today." Oh my gosh. He just buried his wife, and I was the baby. The next day he uh, came over to the elementary high school and went to uh, the principal's office. Did I say high school, elementary school? And went to the principal's office. And I don't know what happened, but he was ready to pounce on somebody. And, probably would have, if he did do that, they'd probably arrested him. But that was an experience. Then another time, um, all the Indian kids in the school were marched to the what they call the stage, and there was a place where activities could be called the pit, and that was at the old elementary school here in Harlem. And we were all marched up on the stage and had our hair fine combed because they were looking for lice. And that was, again, we probably didn't think anything of it. Um, Probably because we didn't have to be in the classroom. I'm not sure, but I remember that clearly. And they just assumed, I suppose, that we were, there. Here we are, Indian, poor little Indian kids, that we all had lice, I guess. And so that was a bad experience. But I got through there, and then at that time, the elementary school went to the first grade to the sixth grade. I don't think they had junior high at the high school. Now that I think back, maybe they did. Yeah, maybe they did. And then but when I was 12 years old, I wanted to go to Flandre Indian School. So my dad let me go. And then there he was all alone. So I went to Flandre Indian School when I was 12 years old. And that was an experience. It wasn't as bad an experience that probably some of my other people had even before that, because but the bad thing that I remember was we didn't learn anything. uh, they didn't feel that we were, oh, why bother, you'll never go to college, that kind of attitude. So we had to be uh, taking classes like home ec, sewing, uh, um, what all entails, you know, domestic, I think. And then the males that went there had to take a trade. You know, that was how they taught us. And I remember we had, I think I took general math, but I might have taken English class because that has been my favorite. Not because math, I guess just because of that background. And I don't know, I'm sure I must not have learned anything in the elementary school either. So I came back, and then my dad, he was too lonely, so I didn't get to go back to Calandra. And I went back to Harlem High School, and I had to take an algebra class, and I panicked. And so my friend, she was good in math, and she helped me. I don't know, we probably cheated because I don't think I ever learned algebra in that school. And I would help her with English. I would help her with writing. So that's how we got by. I remember I got a B. But another experience in high school, and I think it was not being around white people or being feeling inferior. I was in a biology class, and a general biology or something. And I remember the teacher, we had to, oh, they moved me into a higher group. They moved me with to a higher for that class, in with some, I would say, some white girls that you know, they were the popular ones and probably the cheerleaders or whatever. And I was the only Indian in that class. And so we had to give verbal or uh, presentations, like speech. And so they start calling off names, and he said, Carole. And I just sat there. And he said, Carole. And I just froze. I sat there. And he said, you're going to get a lower grade if you don't come up here. And uh, I didn't. And because I was ashamed. And I don't know why I was ashamed. And anyway, I guess I would have got a B. Anyway, he gave me a C, not a F anyway. But that's the kind of experience that we had. Some of the guys, of course, in sports, you know, they hung out with a lot of the white kids, but um, it was, I was not, I was not comfortable. I was not comfortable. I didn't hate them. I was just uncomfortable and thought, well, you know, they were better than me. They had better clothes. They had just everything. So that was the experience I had. But I need to tell you about while I was in high school. Um, we were allowed to walk uptown, so to speak, Main Street, at lunchtime. So one day, my friend and I, fading plumage, actually, fading file steel now, we walked uptown, and we were just walking around, probably went and got ice cream or something. And we said, oh, let's go take a picture by this place. And actually it was a bar. And you know, we just wanted to take a picture. And that bar still exists in Harlem. So we stood in front of that, and we thought that we were real cute because we, you know, we always wore dresses. Uh, and we thought, I don't know if we were posing, but I have this picture, and I'm gonna have to find it. We misplaced it, and it's the only picture we have. And on that door of that bar, it said, "No Indians and dogs allowed." And that's just, you know, you think back, but at the time, we didn't think anything of it because we figured that was what to do. And so that was part of my high school memories also at Harlem. But I always got good grades, and I got on the honor roll a few times, so it wasn't too bad. But there was, by the time we finished high school with all my uh, friends from first grade, only five of us graduated.
Mm.
Of all the kids that we were all together in my class, there were only five Indians that graduated. I mean,
Yeah. And well, then later you went to, and we'll come back, like I said, back and forth, but um, you can attribute all that to the mindset that you guys were ingrained with, that you would only go so far in life. And then
mhm.
went to Haskell though, and was that kind of the same kind of educational experience in terms of um, what you were being trained for? You weren't, like you said, your favorite subject, English and other things like that. But what were you trained to be at Haskell?
Well, they figured that we could do is they called it commercial, and what that was is to be a secretary or clerk. That was what, and it was called Haskell Institute, and to this day it's called Haskell Indian Nations University. And at the time I went there, they also had a high school, so they called us. Of course it's university now, and they called it postgraduate. So we received diplomas, when we graduated, but um, it was a 2 year experience, and I was trained to be a secretary, and I probably chose that because of my mother and my aunts. I had two aunts also that were in those fields, but one of them actually went on to be a GS-15 in the Bureau years and years later. But so that's what again, it was a boarding school. They were strict with us, but not as strict as they would have been in Flandria. But these matrons would get their field glasses, and when there were movies or whatever, and some boys and girls would hook up with each other. They would come with their flashlights if they were standing in a position too long, or we had a big oval, and they would peer through their field glasses to make sure uh, people were not doing anything bad. And but as far as uh, but there was more freedom. But of course they had high school, so they had to have high school. And I just want to throw in that this is where I met Billy Mills, that everybody knows, and he went with my girlfriend, and her name was Mildred Phillips. She was from Oklahoma, and we were good friends, and we were all taking the same, uh, and that's where I met. Anyway, we had friends, and so Billy Mills. Then one day I'm going to get carried away here, but I just wanted to throw that that I was sitting in a dentist's office in California, and I looked, and they used to have this Life magazine. They don't anymore. And there was a picture on the front page, and there was Billy Mills. And I just screamed, and I said, "I know them." And they didn't believe me. I said, "I know him," and he was with his another friend. Uh, that was, but anyway, that was just kind of experience. But I finished at Haskell. Well, anyway, I did graduate with honors.
Yeah.
So um, my dad was real proud of that.
Yeah. Well, how did you get to, so once you got done with Haskell, did you immediately go to, in that relocation program to California, or did you come back up here for a while and then they had the opportunity, or how did that come about?
Well, when I was in Haskell, they recommended they recommended me to go to Washington, D.C., along with a woman, with a girl named Helen Baker from Newtown, Hidatsa from Newtown, North Dakota. And because we had good grades and we did so well, they wanted us to go there. And I didn't want to. And at the time, my aunt Carmen was living there. My sister was living in California. So eight of our graduates, two girls from Alaska, one guy from Arizona, one guy from Kansas. Uh, anyway, there were eight of us. I can't think that that relocated, and I don't know how we were relocated. I really don't remember, but they sent us on from Haskell, and we I came home first, and but right away I just came home, saw my dad, and then left for California. And this is really crazy because I have to say that I was so very afraid because I went there on the train, and I was really scared when I got there. And then I had to get transportation on my own to uh, to my friend who uh, had a had an apartment already. And uh, but there was eight, so I had to leave here. So all the eight of us were all from different places, but we all met in California. And of course, it was the bureau who helped us get a job, because we all had to report to the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Alameda, uh, California, which is right next to Oakland. And so they sent us on to different places. And my first job was for the Army Engineers, and it was in San Francisco. So can you imagine this? See, this poor little Indian girl by herself. I had to board a bus to San Francisco, got off at this big terminal, and I was so worried because I even remember the address, 180 New Montgomery, and not really knowing how they dress. I remember I had white shoes and for my interview, and I can't remember. And white is a no-no in San Francisco. Apparently, they don't dress that way. And so I went to my. I didn't know where the address was, so I stopped someone, and they were a person of color. I asked them where 180 New Montgomery was, and they start talking to me, and they were Hispanic. And then I almost cried because I didn't know where I was going, because they didn't, by then, they thought we probably I knew I was mature enough to, but I wasn't as assertive and outgoing. But anyway, uh, that was how I got to California. That was my first job, and I had others after that.
Yeah. And what And I know you came back for a time and then went back uh, to California. And but we could talk about that another time. But what when you got to after you spent time in California for several years, so you brought up why you chose to be in the career path during that first part in the 60s, 1960s. um, you mentioned your aunts and your mom were secretaries. Would you say they were your role models and that's why you chose that path? Because
Yeah.
yeah, because I was just trying to think of I was going to ask you, who do you attribute, you had a long career of, from secretary to tribal college president, and who do you attribute your success initially to? I mean, I know you had people influence you all along your life, but who do you think set you on that path?
Well, my dad always used to tell me how important it was when I was in school. Right after we ate and I did the dishes, then I would sit at the table and do my homework. He really watched that, and I I I think I just wanted to, um, well, like I guess it was those two aunts that they went they went to school. My grandma, uh, my Niwa wanted actually wanted me to go to Gonzaga University for nursing, and I said, she said, if you go there, I'll pay for everything. And I said, oh, mom, we all called them mom, mom and pop. Mom, I can't stand the sight of blood and I'm scared of needles. I had an accident when I was 5 and I'm still scared of needles. Um, so all she did was laugh, it's just a happy woman. Anyway, so I think it was not encouraging, but um, maybe I just wanted to, I don't even remember. I think I might have wanted to uh, follow some friends because some of my friends uh, were at Haskell. Well, for another thing, my sister had gone to Haskell and she met her husband there at Haskell. And maybe it was just a given, but I know I wanted to go, and I'm not sure uh, if it was because it was a thing to do, but my grades were good, and I just wanted to be there, and maybe because I hated so much to leave Flandreau, and I think it was I had met so many um, people, and some of them were at Haskell. I think it was just the idea of being lonely growing up, without a mother, and uh, my dad was a good father, but he also, he missed my mother so much he started drinking, and so it was kind of it was a happy and sad time.
Yeah,
So I guess I just wanted to be around people
yeah,
at Haskell, but at all of us that left Haskell, the 8 of us, uh, we all did well because when I left the San Francisco job, and then I got a job in Berkeley and with the Forest Service. So uh, I had ties to the UC Berkeley, but uh, I was still a secretary. And then And then from there, I took a civil service test, and I scored almost 100. The first time I took it was in Haskell, and I scored, I think, 88.5. So that's what I've sent there. But the next time, I think I had almost 100 on a score, and I was actually recruited uh, from Oakland Army Base, and they had. I didn't know there was another Haskell graduate that was working there, and so I was hired. I got a job, and I worked for the head of finance department. He was a GS-15. He was the head, so that he had the same uh, rank, you might say, as a civilian as a full colonel. So after a while, he got selected to be the special advisor to the commanding general. And he said, well, I'm taking you with me. So I ended up working in the office of the commanding general. And that was quite an experience, working with these 4-star generals, kind of learning the how they operate in those days. And so that's where I was before. That's where I stayed until we moved back to Montana. But during that time, I guess I left out an important thing. I got married
Oh,
when I was in California. Well, actually, I got married in Reno, Nevada.
oh
but
yeah.
but I met my husband. I knew him when I was a freshman, when I was 12 years old in Flandre. And my brother was a senior at that time. And so he was a junior, I think. And I knew who he was. And so he's always telling people that, he says things. But so anyway, in the meantime, after my job at Berkeley, then he was in the Air Force, and we met. And so anyway, we got married. And so when we moved back to Montana, the second time you said that we came home and then we went back.
Yeah.
And I think I'm getting myself confused, because it was when we went back that I got this job with the Oakland Army Base. Yeah, I was confused because my my son was born about 4 months before we moved back to Montana.
Oh.
And I had 2 older ones, and then I had my youngest.
That would be your favorite son, right?
And now here's another experience that we had, and we're talking about in this time racism and discrimination. Before we left Oakland, well, in the meantime, my husband had transferred Xerox, that he worked for Xerox Corporation after he got out of the service, and he was relocated. He really wanted to come back to Montana. So, not relocated, but Xerox sent him back, and he wanted to be placed. And then, so they sent him to Glendive, Montana. But on the way back, because the weather in Oakland is fair, it's not like, it wasn't just hot. So of course we didn't have air conditioning in in our vehicle. We were in a business vehicle that Xerox gave him a vehicle. I mean, that's the vehicles that they allowed, and so on the way back, before we left, I uh, came down with strep throat. Well, strep throat is very contagious, and so everyone, all of my three kids and myself and my husband, we all had to get shots. And I was really sick, but I got better. And then on the way back, the baby got sick. So on our way back, we got into Bozeman, and they didn't have any vacancies. And of course, later in all those years, we realized they were having their national college rodeo, uh, their national college rodeo finals. Well, there were no vacancies anyplace. So we drove on to a town called Columbus, and we went right to the hospital because my baby was starting to get dehydrated, and we stopped there, and they wouldn't accept us. They said, "Well, Billings is just a little ways, so maybe you should go there to emergency." And we were not in California. We were never treated bad. I think it was the Black people at the time that were probably treated poorly. So they probably considered us. They didn't know what we were, I guess. So that was really awful. And so by the time we got to, it was early in the morning. And we got to Billings, and at Billings, uh, St. V's, I believe, is the hospital that we went to. And right away, of course, they took care of everything. And then we were so tired. Then we figured, well, Glendive was 200 miles from Oakland. I mean, from Billings. So then we were, and my baby and myself and my two kids, we slept every bit of the way because by then we were so tired. And then when we got onto Glendive, it was like 105 degrees and we had no air conditioning. So anyway, we were young, so it's quite an experience.
Well, little did you know that you'd be doing the same thing, driving all night when you guys hit the powwow trail.
Yeah. Yeah, I left that part out too, because I mean, yeah, there's just a long story of how we got involved and everything.
Yeah, we could, you know, we could do another part two later. I was trying to
Because I'm jumping around, I'm thinking
oh,
of
that's
these
all
things.
right. No, that's all right. I think, you know, maybe next time we can get into even though you were you know you were you grew up here, then you went on relocation, then you met a lot of people. There was, it seemed like there was a support system of some kind for Indian people, from what I gather. You guys went together at Haskell, and you all wanted to go to a city too. Some made it, some didn't. You guys were one of the few that made it out there. And but you also would gather at these Indian centers too. So maybe next time we could start off on that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because
That's a big deal that would in your guys' life, in all of our lives too. So maybe I think we've been gone. I think we've been going an hour, and that might be pretty. That might be good enough for now,
Yeah, we are. Of
because
course.
we might get rejuvenated next time and talk about that and some other things. Your time in Glendive, and then, but just some things to think about. You know what? I don't know if I should ask this now. Maybe I will, and we'll see how it splices together. I'll ask one last question um, in this part one, and then when we start again next time, we'll go back. So, so you had a long career in education, um, about 16, 17 years. You were in Glendive, Montana, and you worked at Dawson Community College, helping students. And when your husband, when he got transferred from Glendive to Billings, Montana with Xerox, you decided to go back to school, back to college, even though you had that long career and learn things that they don't teach in college. What made you go back to college at the age you did? And I don't want to tease you, but I don't want to tease you when you went back to college, because I'm at that age right now. So
Um, this is really crazy. While we were in Glendive, uh, my oldest son and my husband started making uh, fancy dance bustles. And one day we got a call from Deborah. His horse is Thunder, although at that time she was married to a guy by the name of Larry LeCount. And they lived in North Dakota, close to Glendive. And she wanted to have uh, uh, have Al teach them how to make bustles because her son wanted to dance. So then I became associated with Deborah, and then the next time I saw her or knew of her, she was working at Eastern Montana College too. So it was after I got hired at Glendive. I'm kind of jumping, but you're saying, so I was working, and she kept telling me, "You need to, you need to advance. You need to advance." And I'd say, because remember by then I said, uh, my math wasn't good. My knowledge of, or it was just difficult for me. And I imagine it was from, I don't want to blame Flandreau, but probably because we never learned anything. So she kept encouraging. And then my aunt died, my dad's sister, and we lived in Billings. And I had always worked, and I wasn't doing anything. And I just told my husband, I said, I'd really like to enroll and go back to school. So that's how I got started, and he was really encouraging and very encouraging all the way.
yeah, well, I think we'll hold off. We'll hold that, and you would eventually graduate with your bachelor's in human services, right? And
Yeah.
from Eastern Montana College, now MSU Billings, they call it. But I think we'll hold off. We'll stop there, and we'll carry on this conversation uh, in the next session of the ANC's President's Elders series. So we thank everyone for watching, and Guinea hand, and we'll see you guys again. Duncan Hubbard.
Guinea on to all of you.
Thanks for part 1.